Hi, and welcome to Taking Voice of the Customer to the Next Level, a Take 30 with One-to-One Media webcast. I'm Tom Hoffman at One-to-One Media, and I'll be the moderator for today's discussion, where we'll be exploring best practices for developing more fully evolved Voice of the Customer programs, along with effective ways for connecting the dots to business value. Our featured speaker today is Ingrid Lindberg, Chief Customer Experience Officer at Prime Therapeutics, a pharmacy benefits manager in Eagan, Minnesota, which serves more than 20 million customers. A One-to-One Media 2011 customer champion, Ingrid is responsible for building the Voice of the Customer program at Prime Therapeutics and improving the customer experience. Prior to joining Prime Therapeutics, Ingrid was the Customer Experience Officer at Cigna, where she was responsible for implementing and overseeing the company's customer experience strategy that was used to help manage its relationships with its 65 million customers. Ingrid, thanks so much for joining us today.
Tom, thanks so much for having me. Great to hear you again.
You too. So before we jump into the discussion with Ingrid, I'd like to offer our attendees a few pointers on using the On24 tool. First, please turn off your pop-up blockers to enable a survey that we'll be providing during the webcast. We'd encourage everyone to participate. To download a copy of today's slides, please click on the green resource widget. If you have a question for one of our presenters, please click on the red Q&A widget and then type in your question and then hit submit. If you encounter any technical issues during the webcast, please click on the help button that's located in the center of the toolbar. Also, feel free to tweet about today's webcast using the hashtag that's shown here. Now for a little bit more background on the key points we'll be covering in today's discussion. Today, Ingrid and I will examine effective approaches for ensuring that employees are acting on customer feedback. We'll also explore best practices for drawing upon comments that customers make in social channels and other forms of unsolicited feedback like that. And then finally, we'll delve into steps for measuring the business benefits that can result from Voice of the Customer programs. So the things that customers share with us through both their solicited and unsolicited feedback can be used in a variety of ways to help sales, marketing, customer service, and even other functional and business units and companies to craft more relevant messaging, more relevant and personalized offers, as well as to develop more effective and targeted products and customer service experiences. And because customers share so much information through their multi-channel interactions with companies, whether this is through recorded contact center discussions they might have, or chat and email and face-to-face interactions with customer-facing employees, it can be very difficult to try to gather and analyze and then act on these insights that customers share with us without having some kind of a structured approach to this. These efforts are also further complicated when there are data silos between different functional and business units. As a result, this prevents business leaders from being able to gain a complete view of customer feedback. Now, Voice of the Customer programs can provide companies with a much more effective means of gathering and acting on customer feedback. And VOC programs can also help boost business performance, but only when they're managed right. Research conducted by Peppers and Rogers Group last year reveals that information that's gathered through VOC programs have helped more than 40% of companies to be able to make improvements to customer experience, while other companies that were surveyed have also been able to improve marketing effectiveness and also to better identify the key drivers for a company's business. Still, even though many companies have been able to use VOC programs to identify opportunities for improving the customer experience, including, say, process roadblocks that customers cite or the navigation of a company's website, a lot of VOC programs end up falling short in connecting the dots to business performance. In fact, research by Forrester reveals that most VOC programs don't deliver enough financial or customer value. Today we're fortunate to have with us a true VOC leader in Ingrid, who will share with us her experiences in driving VOC programs at Prime Therapeutics and other companies. And she'll be also discussing approaches that these companies have taken to correlate customer feedback efforts with business performance. Ingrid, thanks again for joining us.
It's my favorite topic, Tom. You know that. So I'm excited to get to chat with you today about some of the learnings that I've had throughout the course of my 10 to 15 years doing this now for a living. So excited to be here.
Excellent. Thanks. So Ingrid, maybe as a starting point, can you tell us about the charter for Prime Therapeutics and its VOC program?
So I've been with Prime for about 9 months now. And one of the reasons that I was so drawn to Prime was the purpose that we have. And our purpose here is to help people get the medicine they need to feel better and live well. And when I was approached by Prime to come and take this role, I said, well, that's a fantastic purpose, but how do you do that? And the answer that I received was, well, isn't that your job to help us figure out if you do accept this mission? So I view my role as figuring out how those 22 million people that we serve actually want us to deliver on that purpose, right? How do they want us to do that? What do they actually want from us? And how can we make sure that we're meeting their needs at every step in that process?
Okay, so, based on your experiences, your short tenure at Prime Therapeutics, but also, the work that you've done at Cigna and other companies, what are some of the things that you hear from customers about? What do they share?
It's fascinating to me. So in this industry, I've been in healthcare now for about, almost a decade, coming from financial services. And when I was in financial services, we heard a lot about bad service, or we heard about you've lost my money. But when I got into healthcare, I was, lucky enough to realize how much more emotional this interaction is than a traditional financial transaction. And I'm not saying it's not emotional if you lose a lot of money, but your health has a very emotional wrapper for most people. Your health, your family members' health. And so what we were able to learn, or what I've seen over the course of time, is what people want from us is that ability to help them make a better decision. The industry of healthcare has spent years and years really trying to educate people on how healthcare works. And what people just keep telling us is, look, I don't have time to understand how you underwrite a plan or what the risk pool is that you have. I just want to make sure that you're going to be there for me when I need you, because that's what I pay you for. Now that I'm at Prime, where we deliver pharmacy and pharmacy benefits, so we actually deliver medicines to people's houses, and we have pharmacy coverage for those 22 million people, what we hear consistently is, please just make it easy for me, because if I need medicine, I need it now. And please get that medicine to me pretty quickly. In our industry, we haven't traditionally looked at Amazons and Zappos of the world when we're trying to set standards for delivery time. But those people we serve, they shop with us and they shop with Zappos. So at the end of the day, we've got to figure out how to do exactly what a Zappos is doing.
That makes sense. So while we're talking about this too, successful VOC programs not only draw upon customer feedback, but they also have a structure in place where they ensure that customer feedback is acted on, or whether it's acted on or not, is shared with customers as to how their feedback has been used. And I'm wondering if you could talk to us about some of the ways that you're able to act on customer feedback and then share these actions with customers.
I love that question, right? Because if you do things in a vacuum and people don't know that you're actually making changes based on what they're talking about, you lose the opportunity to be a part of that conversation. So I think one of the most integral parts is that follow-up. One of my favorite examples of that is we were doing some work at a prior employer, and in healthcare, your plan description, your summary plan description, is a document that's handed out to explain to you as a member of that healthcare plan about all the benefits you've got. It's usually supplemented with an easy-to-use enrollment guide. These are the things you need to click on. This is how you enroll in this type of insurance. And when we actually paid attention to not just the market research component, but the pure voice of customer reaction around how people made decisions about their health care, what we found was that people really distrusted us because they felt like we were hiding things. and that we would make decisions on a one-off basis, that there were no set of rules that was really out there for them to understand. So we dug into that little tidbit a bit more, and we learned that the thing that was driving this was in the enrollment guide, or in that summary plan description, it would say, and other services not covered, ... And you had to go through a myriad of hoops to try to figure out what that ... meant. So what we chose to do in this instance, was we took an entire page in that enrollment guide, right, that piece of paper, that handy-dandy little tool that we handed out to all of the people that we served, and we dedicated an entire page in the front of that enrollment guide to the services that we didn't cover. So we didn't talk about all the great stuff we did. We just very clearly articulated what we didn't do. Very clearly articulated what we didn't do. And then we said to our membership, to the customers that we served, look, here's the deal. You wanted to know what we didn't cover, so we're showing you. We're opening the cloak. This is a great trust moment. This is the list. There's nothing else on the list. It was in 14-point font. We made it as big and as easy as we possibly could. And at the end of the day, we got such amazing feedback from our customers on that. People were calling us and saying, I've never worked with a company who told me what they didn't do. It made it easier for me to make my decision. So it ended up being something that we kept, and we would always celebrate with customers and point out to customers every time we interacted with them. You know, there's a bunch of stuff that we do, but we're not going to celebrate that. We're going to very clearly show you what we don't cover so that you'll never be surprised.
That's a great example, and thanks for sharing that. So just as a follow-up, so after customers responded and said, no one has ever shared with us what they don't do the way that the company had, was there, did the company take any steps after that to try to measure the impact that type of transparency had?
So we did. We had actually figured out a way to correlate incoming phone calls to our call center about services not covered attached to that element of surprise. So I always called it that disruption when you found out that something wasn't there that you thought would be, like traditional buyer's remorse. We were able to correlate what we did in the clear communications around the enrollment guide to a significant decrease in phone calls attached to buyer's remorse, which at the end of the day created much more loyal customers.
Right. Okay, thanks. So let's talk about employees for a moment, because customer feedback often comes through employees, and the relationships that customers develop with companies are often based on the interactions that they have with employees. I'm wondering, what are some of the steps that you've taken to ensure that employees are receiving and also acting on customer feedback?
So I am a firm believer, Tom, in the fact that everybody really wants to be a part of something bigger than themselves. And most of the time, a lot of companies that I've had the pleasure of doing business with in a consulting role, I walk into voice of customer programs, and it's this great, smart group of people sitting in a corner, but they've never told anyone other than the C-suite what they've learned. And one of the rules of the road that I have just come to adopt is it's all about communicate, communicate, communicate. My primary job as a customer experience officer is to consistently communicate through multiple channels to our employees about what we know and what we learn. And I do that through emails, through blogs, through in-person dialogue. I've worked at companies where outages in any of our customer platforms were run as a ticker underneath the bottom of all of our employees' computer screens, because if a website goes down and we have 50,000 people touching that website a day, everybody should know about it. And I think at the end of the day, it's a matter of finding the right way to tell the story for the different audiences of your employees. Because an audience that is made up of perhaps frontline probably already know a lot more than someone who may be sitting kind of back in your home office and is hiding a little bit away and doesn't have the opportunity to interact with the customers as much. So I've learned that kind of middle management layer is definitely key and up, but it's all in the storytelling and the constant communication. You can do that in handouts, in books, in videos, in movies. I've created live action rooms, but it's just about constantly communicating the same story with updates as to where you made change based on the data and what the results of those changes were.
That's interesting. What led you to decide to act on that aspect of employee engagement with that layer of employees?
So it was, I think, probably for me, mostly experience, right? My first couple of jobs having this role, I thought that if I could get my C-suite aligned with me, off and running we would go. I learned pretty early on that specifically people in customer advocate roles or customer service roles have just been waiting for someone to come and be their voice, right? They get it. They know what's wrong. They know about the decisions that you as a company make that really tick off your customers. But it's that middle group, right? It's that group who's responsible in a lot of cases for something that's probably pretty narrow in scope. They may or may not have been doing it for a long period of time. But it really is about getting to that group of people and helping them to understand how impactful their decisions are on what happens to the customer and how can you get them to own changing their world, right? It's finding those interesting centers of influence that really can help move entire organizations much more rapidly than just doing a top-down or bottom-up approach.
Right. Okay, thanks. So many companies are struggling these days with how do we incorporate comments that customers make in social channels and other forms of so-called unstructured data that comes out from the way that customers interact with companies in unstructured dialogues. I'm wondering if you could share different ways that you've been able to draw upon social customer comments and other types of unsolicited feedback.
You know, Tom, I love it when we talk about unstructured because everyone immediately goes to social. And I think social is, almost becoming easier. There's tons of people you can go partner with that can do the data mining for you. Shoot, I've got Hootsuite sitting on my desktop most of the time just watching anyone who talks about the company I'm working at and my past companies. I can never completely disconnect. So social to me is kind of the easy one, when it comes down to it. Just monitor, aggregate, look for themes, and off you go. Where I think it gets really interesting is the quiet chatter that happens outside of social. And I've learned that there's something to be said about what people talk about outside of Twitter, right? What people talk about outside of Twitter. One of my favorite stats was the average complaint about a brand is seen by 780,000 people before it is seen by the brand that you're complaining about. So, you can rectify that. You can quickly respond and you can make moves and you can make yourself look like a very responsive, empathetic company. I think what's interesting is when you actually sit down and start to talk to people, when you take the time to go into their homes, when you do the ethnographic research. And one of my favorite tools to really bring that customer to light in a company is to bring customers to my executive team. I've done things like had face-to-face meetings where I've sat my executive team down in a boardroom and, marched 10 customers in and just made them spend an hour together. That's fun. I also love doing blinded focus groups where I'll have 80 of my most senior leaders at a company sitting in a room, for some big annual leadership conference. And then I'll start piping in a live focus group that we're holding in the room next door. It's a bit less intimidating for those customers that you're using as a part of the focus group. And then you marry the two groups together and let them have some cocktails. It's very eye-opening for the executives that are in there and the executives that are finally having a touch to that customer. So I think that, social is great. Pay attention to social. But there's a lot of other ways to make a connection to get those customer comments into your organization at the right place.
Yeah, those are great points. And, as you touched on, social is one means of drawing upon that customer comments, but there are other things that customers don't always share in social that they might more freely share during the types of forums or other exchanges that you mentioned. So you've been at Prime Therapeutics for about 9 months, you mentioned, Ingrid. What are the things that you focused on since starting the VOC program there?
Tom, one of my favorite things is starting from scratch every time because you learn at every company what to do differently for the next one. So my first step that I always take is market research is important, but it's not voice of customer. So I always spend an enormous amount of time during my first 12 to 18 months at any new role really trying to aggregate all of the different owners of all the different data sources. So I create things like voice of customer councils, right? So you establish a leader for voice of the customer, and then you bring all, once again, those centers of influence who own those different pieces of disparate data into a group, because at the end of the day, I want a bunch of voice of customer advocates not just a group who's sharing information and distributing from the middle. I want to be able to make sure that all those people that are in the call centers or in the operations facilities or engaging with sales and distribution, that you have all of those people ticked and tied across that entire Voice of Customer program, so that as people learn things from the disparate areas and you look for the patterns across the aggregate, they then push back into their own departments. So we're at that step right now, but excited that we just wrapped up building our persona set with Cooper, and we're in some pretty beginning stages, but it's that exciting time where I'm starting to see everything come together, and people are not just looking at the results from their specific organization, they're suddenly understanding where the downstream impacts, effects, or drivers are really coming from.
That's interesting. Especially it sounds like it's starting to really take hold with different constituents there.
It is.
Can you also talk about some of the ways in your experiences with different companies, including Prime, that you've been able to measure the business performance benefits that have been derived from VOC efforts?
I think that's the most important thing. If you're sitting in a corner and you've got all this great information and you're making changes, but you're not paying attention to what the impacts are, you won't be sitting in that corner for very long. So I think one of the best rules that I have come up with, or the best rules of thumb that I've learned, is you really do have to figure out how to create the attention for the changes that you're making that are actually helping the business. Now, whether or not that's through OpEx savings, whether or not that's through close ratios or win-loss analysis, you have to find those attributions. So, for example, recently we were making a change to an email that we were using internally to send out to our customers, and we would say, please call us or talk to our interactive voice response unit or go to our website. And I took one quick look at that email and I said, well, why on earth would we be driving people through an email to a call center? They're already in an electronic channel. And I said, but let's figure out how much of that save we can claim by the call coding. So if I change one simple email to make sure that I'm driving people to the channel that we're communicating to them via, right? So let's put web up front. Let's see what the reduction in call is. That was one of my favorite ones. That's an easy one to grab. I've also worked at companies where we've been able to make the attribution between, for example, we took the stock from $8 a share to $62 a share at its highest point, all on the platform of customer experience based on Voice of Customer data. And we were able to make the analysis, right, or do the analysis and make the attribution between the work that we were doing to enhance the customer experience and our close ratio for employer sales. Right? So employers kept buying us because we were making it easier for their employees, who in turn were using their benefits better. So we were actually able to make that attribution from what we did, listening to the customers, making it easier for them to use their benefits, to the stock price of the company, to healthier employees that we were serving through those 65 million customers we had.
That's impressive.
That took 4 years, but it was good.
Yeah, I'm sure it must have taken time to do that. But, for people who are listening in, can you also share with them how do you get there? For example, what's some advice that you'd offer to people in terms of how you go about connecting the dots between customer feedback and correlating the actions that have been taken to business performance results?
There's lots of different ways to get to that. So I usually say you should start with what's most important to your company. In a lot of cases, a lot of companies in this day and age are trying to do a lot more with a lot less. So if you can point to making it easier for your customers and also taking operational expense out of the company, it is a slam dunk win. Your chief financial officer will love you, right? That's an easy one. The long-term growth, I usually go after retention numbers. So we find out why a customer is leaving a company. We start fixing the things that are driving them away. And then I actually start doing that win-loss analysis and making the attribution back to retention numbers. So that one takes a little bit longer to build. I've also found, close ratios on new sales is another one. So as you get better at what you do, so if you're truly listening and you have happier, more loyal customers, you'll start to see that in your data, right? You'll actually start to see the results of that. And then we would use that for how we closed a sale. It was a part of our, it was part of our pitch. It was a part of our deck. And being able to ask a client, why did you choose us? And have them say, well, look at what you're doing. You're servicing our employees so well. They're healthier. They're happier. There's less noise. They're doing X better. They're saving more money. Whatever it is that your firm is after, that's a pretty good one to go after as well, I've learned.
Absolutely. So, people who are on the call and people in general who work on voice of the customer programs, as you know, each company is at a different level of maturity in terms of where they're at in the journey. But given that, can you still offer some advice as to how people can go about trying to take the voice of the customer programs to the next level? What are some starting points for them to think about?
I always think you have to start with really just getting all of the different people in a room who have all the bits of data. That's where I always start. Once you have that broad view into all of the different customer comments, complaints, feelings across your entire ecosystem, then you can, as a group, decide what you want to change first, get a big win for that group, and it just starts building from there, right? So if you can get one thing right, for example, at a prior employer, we had looked at data that had stated that people were just delightedly happy with our call service. They were fine. Yet when I looked at, in partnership with our interactive voice response people, how many calls we were dropping on a Saturday because we weren't open, and then we started looking at our website traffic and realized that we weren't able to answer the questions that people wanted us to answer on a Saturday because the web didn't answer it, the IVR didn't answer it, and then there wasn't anyone there to pick up the phone, we made a decision that we needed to be 24/7 from a service perspective. Nobody asked for it. We never saw it in the research. It became exceptionally evident that it was a win-win for all. And at the end of the day, once we had that win, we had had the respect of the chief financial officer, we had the ear of the COO, and that allowed us to then just keep moving ahead. It brought costs down on Mondays because all the people who tried to call on Saturday and Sunday and couldn't were calling us on Mondays. We were paying out performance guarantees, right, blah, blah, blah. Craziness. All of a sudden that went away because if I called you on a Saturday, you were there. Once we had that win, the big bang is being able to have a very strong voice, even the decision-making voice, at your prioritization or at your portfolio table. I always say that's that moment where I know that we've really got a company that is more than invested but truly committed to doing this work, is when you, as the voice of the customer representative, are the person who's really driving decisions about where the organization is making its investments.
Okay, thanks. That's great. So Ingrid, thanks for everything that you've shared with us so far. And at this point, we'd like to open this up to the audience Q&A. But first, a few reminders. We'd like to encourage everyone to participate in the survey that's posted during the Q&A period. And please take a moment to participate. Again, to do so, you'll need to turn off your pop-up blockers to enable the survey. Now we'll jump into the Q&A. To ask a question, click on the red Q&A icon, type in your question, and then hit send. And if we don't get to your question today, we'll email you a response. So Ingrid, this first question is about the differences between market research and voice of the customer programs. And why are they two different things? Why aren't they the same thing?
What I've learned over the course of time is that market research is an extremely valuable tool to have, but it is a tool in the tool belt. Market research generally generates answers to questions that people think that you're after. Examples that I would use coming from healthcare, because this is a fun one, we would ask people, do you want a personal coach who can help you lose weight, quit smoking, lower your cholesterol? And 98% of respondents would say, yes, I do. And I'll tell you, we didn't see anywhere near that type of use of that service. So at the end of the day, market research is a piece, but it doesn't give you the full scope. You actually have to be able to pull the data from lots of different pieces, truly understand how people use your system, and then look for the patterns across your population. And that's the difference between market research and voice of the customer.
Thanks, Ingrid. That's great. And thank you so much for sharing all of your fabulous insights with us today. And thanks to all of our attendees for joining us today. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, so any unanswered questions will be addressed by email. This concludes Taking Voice of the Customer to the Next Level, a Take 30 with One-to-One webcast. On behalf of the entire team, thanks for attending and have a great day.